Ruby, for that lovely introduction. Welcome to everybody joining us from lots of places around the world. I see Cape Town, I see America, I see Germany. Oh, and it's moving really quickly. Well, welcome to you all. It's very, very hot here in the UK where I am. Wherever you're joining from, I hope you are having a good day. And I thank you for taking the time to be here with us today for this third in the Wayfinders series. What we're doing with the Wayfinders is basically showing you a spectrum of different ways, different learning journeys that different organizations have around this concept of building more equity in the open access that they do, right? And we hope that this would allow you to get some ideas, expand your thinking, and be inspired by concepts and tips and tricks that other people are playing, or even have a wholesale rethink, right? Depending on what you might hear here today. Hopefully you find something exciting and interesting. And hopefully, if I could have the next slide, please. Hopefully you will also find that there's something for everyone. We hope so. So on our panel today, we've got a lot of different perspectives, 4 different perspectives. We've got Matt from the American Geophysical Union, so a society publisher. We have Susan from AJOL, that's the African Journals Online, which is a platform really for research journals in Africa. We have Nick from MIT Press, so we've got a university press perspective. And finally, we have John from PLOS. So we'll have the fully open access publisher perspective there. So that's why I said hopefully there's something for everyone in this session, and we would like to get right into it. So we will start off and we'll go in the order that you see our speakers' lovely faces there on your slide in front of you. So we'll start with Matt. As speakers come up, what we will do is have all 4 of our speakers present their thinkings on their journeys to building equitable open access. In this session, we are revisiting those dominant models of OA, right? So mostly the pay per publication route. Once we hear from each of our 4 panelists, we will then have Q&A. I assure you we will have some time for Q&A. So let's get right into it. And Matt, I will give you the floor. As each panelist comes up, you will see a little bit of information about them. So I'll skip introductions and we'll get right into it.
Am I unmuted? Okay. Can everybody see my slides? Or did they disappear? Okay. Well, all right. Now I can see my slides. Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to talk with you all today. I'm Matt Giampoala. I'm from the American Geophysical Union based in the United States, but we are a society publisher that are global in our perspectives and participation for our journals. Just a little bit about us. We have 24 peer-reviewed journals.
Matt, sorry to interrupt you, Matt. We can't see your slides. You're not sharing them. You just reshare.
Okay, we'll share again. Something went wrong there.
We now have slides. Thank you. You could just put them into presentation mode. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So now everything's working the way I expected it to. We have 12 of our journals are now fully open access. 12 of them are still in a subscription, more traditional model with hybrid open access options. It takes a lot of editors and community members to make our journals run. We have I'd say close to 900 editors and associate editors at the moment to review more than 17,000 submissions a year and publish 7,500 articles. It's, you know, 20, 30,000 review invitations a year to get that many papers reviewed. And I know we're not even that big of a publisher. We also have a books program, which has some OA options now, which I'll mention. And we have our own preprint server that we encourage people to use, or to use any preprint server they like. And all this is overseen by AJOL's Publications Committee, and we're also partnered with Wiley as our publishing partner. Just a little bit more about AJU. I think thinking about the history of journals is helpful. First journals starting way back in 1665. Our first journal started in 1896. It was originally called Terrestrial Magnetism. AGU was founded after, and through a series of events, eventually AGU took on the publishing of the journal and other journals, and the journal was renamed to Journal of Geophysical Research. And I've noted here in 1949, there was a Nature news article mentioning that the journal was changing name, and it was going to now have page charges for the first time to help support publications. So these journals that have started sort of grassroots, like what we would think a Diamond OA journal now, have evolved over time and found ways to sustain themselves. We've added more journals, and again, I wanted to mention that public partnership with Wiley, but this second half of my timeline here is really about beginning to transition to open access and to work to expand access and all the things we've done there. So some of the progress we've made, we've now made it so all members have free access to journal articles. It used to be that members would have to directly subscribe with a special rate. We've pursued green open access by allowing opening everything up after 24 months, by allowing all sorts of sharing of articles, including preprints and author-accepted manuscripts. We provide a place for that in the Earth and Space Science Open Archive, and again, we allow people to do that wherever they need to. All of our journals support gold open access, and we're transitioning more journals to gold open access, and we're supporting that through waivers, which is why I was invited to talk today. So overall, through all this work, we've moved to more than 70% of our papers are available through immediate gold open access mechanisms across our portfolio. We've transitioned 4 of our traditional subscription journals to open access, most recently our Geophysical Research Letters, which is our largest journal, and Water Resources Research, which is our second largest journal. As of January 1, everything's all OA there. So most of our authors do this through OA fees, either being paid through an institutional agreement or transformative agreement with Wiley, but many get waivers, and so there's several mechanisms for that. Anyone in a Research for Life country gets an automatic waiver, but we also explicitly allow people to ask for waivers, and we give them ways to do that. Last year, we've been trying to hit this threshold of 5% of our articles are waived, and anything above that, we've now instituted this new fund, which is funds AGU has set aside to directly act as a payer to Wiley for anything over that 5% threshold. And we've had that fund for several years and not hit it. So one of the things we did last year that I think is helping us get over that threshold is we stated very explicitly, big letters at the top of our publications fees page, that that we're committed to equitable scientific publishing, and all accepted articles will be published regardless of the author's ability to pay publication fees. And we've put that in multiple places, and we've sent that message out to our readership, our membership. So as of this year, with transitioning more journals to open access, and as I said, some of our bigger ones, and this messaging, it feels like it's getting through, and we're now at 6%. So we're using that fund we've set aside. Just wanted to give a little bit of a aside about Research for Life. These are countries under Research for Life that are covered as for those automatic waivers in the map there. But I think we're like many publishers that Research for Life started as a way to get subscription open access for these countries, either free or extremely low cost to institutions that sign up. But as open access has become more important, and we've been trying to facilitate full participation and inclusion, we're using this as a proxy for when we give automatic waivers, and I know many others do that as well. And the Research for Life last year decided that there really needs to be a committee focusing not just on the dissemination of information to these countries, but making them full partners in equity for co-creation and sharing their research with the world as well. So they decided that we should have an equity committee started. And I'm mentioning it because I am now co-chair of this equity committee, and we're forming the committee as we speak. My co-chair, Nasser Kotoni, is in Nairobi in Kenya, as a librarian there. And we are bringing members from various Research for Life countries. So hopefully many of those countries that you see colored in on the map there. And just this last weekend, we had conversations with people in countries like Myanmar, Nepal, Benin, Malawi, Mauritius, who are very interested in giving their perspective on how these countries can be fully included. And we're hearing, questions about like, well, they didn't know that they could get a waiver, or they asked for waivers and it says the waivers are available, but then they get told no. So this committee is hopefully going to be able to give more information to partners such as OASPA and other efforts to help move forward with equity. And some of the things we're looking at here is can we work on promoting transparency and clarity, being a clearinghouse for all the waiver policies or other funding policies that other organizations have? Can we get more editorial board members from these countries on global journals? One plug I want to give: if anybody is in Latin America, Caribbean, Central America, South America, we are looking for people to join on the committee from there, because we're having trouble reaching and finding members to join from that for the committee. Okay, so I already mentioned that you could see the shift to open access has really accelerated over the past several years, and that's intentional. It's not just because of mandates that are coming about, but we're actively transitioning journals and leaning into these transformative agreements. And I also wanted to mention that for us, it's not just about open access, but it's about the full span of open science. So we have requirements around open data, and you can see here progress we've made in getting data citations into our journals. I just wanted to give that context. Okay, so digging into the waivers. So our publication fees are listed here. All the journals with a star, the 10 to the left, are fully open access. So those are the mandatory fees you'd have to pay without a waiver. And then the two on the right are journals that are subscription journals that also have a base publication fee. And just a flavor for what we've been seeing, the trends we've been seeing in waivers over the years. And you can see a few, like GRL is Geophysical Research Letters, that just went open access. And you can see now with the two things, with saying very explicitly that everyone's eligible for a waiver if they need one, and having that journal switch, we've had a big jump in the number of people we're giving open access to.
Sorry to interrupt you, Matt, but we are at time. If there's a quick point you wanted to make.
Yeah, I'll just end on this. And if there's questions, this is just showing the countries and the percentage of open access across countries. There's another view of it here. Yeah, we are seeing that in the US we're giving waivers as well. And I'll hand it off.
Thank you, Matt. And I'm sure there will be questions and we can dig into that a bit more about the waiver fund and things like that. But if I could give the floor now to Susan, who's going to talk to us about the fee charging OA publishing context from the AJOL perspective. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much for that intro. I will try to be brief. So I think that this is probably quite a self-evident truth that global input is necessary to address global challenges, and researchers in the global south are obviously often best positioned to solve the challenges within their local contexts and regions. But Southern journals historically have faced many challenges in terms of being recognized internationally and perceived as credible even within their own countries and regions, because of an historical power inequality between the global north and the global south in terms of the power of the massive commercial scholarly publishers in Europe and North America that has been kind of the predominant means of sharing knowledge in higher education for the last 50 plus years. So the first of these challenges was recognized quite early on, and AJOL was set up in terms of making the visibility of content that is published out of Africa accessible on the internet. It was first started 25 years ago. And as Malavika mentioned, we are not a publisher of these journals. We are an indexing and hosting service to the journals we work with. There, that screenshot belies our progress. There are about 770 titles on the site now, and over 500 of them are open access. They're published in all different research disciplines. Multiple languages are required to be published primarily from an African country or African countries. They're peer-reviewed and quality controlled, and very importantly, that is assessed through an extremely robust system that we call the JPPS, the Journal Publishing and Practices Standards Framework, that uses publishing standards that are commonly known and respected globally in terms of policies and practices in scholarly publishing. Importantly, our platform, unlike some others, it does include all publishing models. So there are a small number of journals that we partner with and have done so historically, that have always been subscription-based and remain so, and are completely closed. There are some that are delayed OA. There are many that are small standalone journals that charge small APCs to make themselves financially viable. And increasingly, though, we are seeing applicants, new journal applicants, and new partners who have started as Diamond from the get-go. So we offer various technical and training services to our partners that are admitted to the site. We do a lot of mentoring and training in sound research and publishing practices. And we exist to amplify African voices and global discourse and to address the equity issues that exist in terms of the power inequity that I was talking about earlier. So we very strongly support and encourage open access and fee-free publication models. And we believe that through the power of economies of scale, our service provision that allows journals publishing from resource-constrained circumstances to be open access, to keep the APCs very low, or to become hopefully Diamond altogether. Just to note about terminology, with all respect to Matt on his great presentation, he mentioned global journals. This terminology is something that I always pick up on. What exactly is meant when people talk about a global journal? The subtext is that is a journal that's published by one of these long-standing professional publishers from the global north. And the Southern journals are referred to as local in a rather derogatory way. So I always question like to question that terminology. So in terms of kind of looking into the financing and funding of open access and questioning the the big APC kind of uptake that was taken up by commercial publishers who wanted to start publishing open access journals. We do obviously host and work with partners who charge APCs, but these are kind of in the region of $150 possibly, rather than sort of $5,000. And these are kind of worlds apart in terms of the volume of money that goes into an APC charged by a journal that we would typically support and partner with, and these which are typically non-profit standalone journals published by scholarly societies or groups of subject specialists, rather than profit-taking or commercial publishers. We are also going to be working on flipping the existing gold partners that we work with and encouraging and providing resources such that they can flip to diamond open access. And this is important to us precisely because of the waivers that Matt was talking about just now, from publishers, the prestigious publishers from the global north, that offer waivers and potentially attract some of the best research done in African countries to continue being published in the north instead of being published within the region, and thus strengthening the knowledge sharing and higher education systems regionally. So we feel quite strongly that for these zero fees, for these diamond open access journals to be feasible anywhere in the world, not just within Africa, the actual costs of publishing these journals by these standalone groups must be surfaced and covered in other ways rather than APCs. I just wanted to show you, out of interest, our stats from 2023 are a little wobbly due to a problem in our upgrade in various different software, free and open source software, during the course of last year. But just to show you, out of the hundreds of thousands of articles that are hosted by AJOL, the orange line shows monthly download numbers of open access journals, free to read journals, while the green line, that is the x-axis, shows those from subscription-based journals. So that tends to zero. And the only reason why those numbers are high at all is because for I think it's pretty much, middle income, lower middle income, and lower income countries, there's a quota of 3 free articles per month per researcher from subscription journals. So I just wanted to also raise, the concept of platforms that have become very much the norm, and increasingly so, to share research outputs from the global south. Thinking about Latin America in particular, that leads on this. Their government policies have and funding have supported platforms that host thousands of journals. They were pushed probably towards that by the language issues that they experience primarily. But these sorts of platforms, and I include AJOL in this, fall very well within the UNESCO recommendations on open science in terms of the values and principles and so on. What we do have as a kind of by the nature of publishing from resource constrained circumstances ourselves, is a challenge with the sustainability aspect, which is the last of the principles on the right-hand side on this slide. We have we're currently working our way through a waiting list of an additional 500 plus journal applicants to AJOL. We are succeeding in massive international and African accessibility and use of content that is coming out of Africa. We are starting to, through the JPPS system, which continuously reassesses ongoing partners and very thoroughly assesses incoming partners. And through the fact that that's a framework that is designed for constant improvement of practices for journals, rather than a yes, you're in or out binary kind of system of judgment of quality of journals. So we are achieving a lot already. We've entered a new really great project looking into the sustainability of diamond open access in Africa in partnership with IFL and WACRAN, which is the West and Central African Research and Education Network. That project started only in November last year and surfaced already the fact that there are 1,000 more titles already publishing diamond from within the continent which qualify for inclusion to AJOL.
Sorry, Susan,
I've got one point left to make.
Yes,
we do need sustainability for equity in terms of continuing our services to these journals. Thank you very much. These are some links to our website, the assessment framework. Please reach out to us. There's my email address. And thank you for the invitation to participate in the Wayfinders workshop.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for that. Lots of food for thought there. And we will press on, if you'll forgive the pun, now to move on to the MIT Press perspective and what an inclusive open access agenda looks like for the MIT Press. Nick, over to you. Oh, Nick, we don't hear you. Sorry. No, I'm afraid we don't. I wonder if
Okay. Do you
Oh, that's better. Yes, yes, brilliant. Here you are. Welcome.
Excellent. Sorry about that. My apologies. So yes, do you see my slides, by the way? Are they up on the screen?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes.
So I'm Nick Lindsay. I'm the Director for Journals and Open Access at the MIT Press. So I run most aspects of the Journals division. And then I also get involved in anything to do with open access, be it books or journals. I'm going to talk about both sides of the house today. So it's going to allow me to, yeah, here we go. Is this actually showing the full slide?
Nick, this is showing, but it's cutting off on the right-hand side of the screen.
Not
If
sure
you have a way of reducing them. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, hold on. How's that?
Yeah, amazing.
Okay, excellent. This is what MIT Press looks like in pie chart form. So we do 350 books a year and about little over 40 journals, which translates to about 2,500 to 3,000 articles in the course of a year. We do a broad range of disciplines at the press. We're pretty ecumenical, but the really big ones are architecture, art and design, cognitive behavioral and brain sciences, computer science, economics, finance, and business, and then some social sciences like science, technology, and society, and the history of technology. We do have several journals at the press that operate under traditional sort of APC-based models. But I'm going to talk briefly about these three things, all of which are OA and all of which operate under less traditional models. The first one is Rapid Reviews Infectious Diseases, which is an overlay journal that we started that publishes nothing but peer reviews of preprints of infectious diseases. Shift to Open, which is our program for taking journals that are currently subscription-based and bringing them to MIT Press and making them Diamond OA. And then finally, Direct to Open, which is our program for making our frontlist monographs open. So Rapid Reviews Infectious Diseases started out as Rapid Reviews COVID-19. We started this journal back in April of 2020. At the beginning of the pandemic, when we were trying to figure out what we could do at MIT Press to really help. And as you may recall, the preprints were getting a bit out of control at that moment. There were thousands and thousands of COVID preprints that were coming out essentially on a weekly basis. And in some cases, the science wasn't great, and it was starting to really impact both the academic and the public debate around COVID in ways that weren't helpful. So we thought, didn't want to do that. We thought that the best way for us to help would be to start an overlay journal, in this case with the UC Berkeley School of Public Health, to offer peer reviews on top of this tsunami of preprints, so people could have a layer of trust in these particular preprints, and it would give us the opportunity for us to identify ones that we felt were not necessarily good science and could be damaging. So we started this journal with $350,000 worth of funding from the McGovern Foundation, and we used that money to fund the editorial office to start, but also for a fair amount of marketing and publicity. So we had never done anything like this before. And so we really needed to get the word out in a big way about this journal, so people understood what it was all about and that it wasn't necessarily a traditional journal from us and what it was that we were trying to accomplish. And then we spent a lot of money customizing the platform so that it could actually handle peer reviews. We had never published a peer review previously, so that was a bit of a challenge too. The reason that this particular journal needs funding is that there's no obvious person or institution in the chain of author, reviewer, reader who could really be charged in this case. So ongoing efforts like this, which are really, I think, really important and certainly point a way forward for journal publishing and for preprint publishing, really need ongoing funding to be sustainable. The journal has actually been successful enough that when COVID started to decline, we didn't fold the journal. We decided we would expand it to include all infectious diseases, including monkeypox, tuberculosis, and so on. Excuse me. The Gates Foundation has seen the wisdom of this approach and has given a substantial grant to expand the program. So we now have editorial offices that are based in India, in Rwanda, and in Mexico. There are more coming. Vietnam, I think, will be the next. And the idea is that we will have a dozen editorial offices based around the world reviewing preprints related to infectious diseases by the end of, I think, 2026, fingers crossed. So foundations that see the importance, see the value in pursuing new models are really essential, not only for getting new ideas off the ground, but also sustaining them in the absence of other sources of funding. Shift to Open is, as I said, bring Diamond open access journals to MIT, bringing subscription journals to MIT Press and making them Diamond open access. The first round of funding that we got to support this program was from the Arcadia Fund, and the second round that we received was from the National Science Foundation here in the United States. It's an open competition with some limited rules. Journals must be published in English, because the press only publishes in English primarily, be under a subscription model, have been published regularly for at least 3 years and on time, with good frequency. And then the journals that we're looking for are really modest in size in this case. We're not looking for big 1,000, plus article journals. This is really for modest quarterlies, maybe publishing 30 to 40 articles a year. We especially wanted to see applicants from the humanities and social sciences, since these areas have traditionally found it more difficult to pursue open access due to their financial constraints. And authors in those areas simply don't have the money to be able to pay for article processing charges. We held an open competition in 2023 and ended up choosing 2 journals from the European Sociological Association. And the MIT Press will underwrite those journals for 3 years, covering all the costs while we establish a more permanent business model for them. And of course, that is the $64,000 question. What is a more permanent business model for these kinds of publications? We anticipate that it'll be a mixed model using an institutional, society, foundation, and funding, along with voluntary contributions from libraries where there is heavy use of the content. So we're not talking about a ton of money here. We're talking about a limited amount of money, and we really want to work with societies that are willing to be efficient and have their publishing operations run sort of lean without sacrificing any sort of quality, so we can come up with a sustainable funding model for them that will work into the future. And then finally, direct to open. So direct to open is a collective action model built to support the open access publication of scholarly books from MIT Press, where neither authors nor readers have to pay. We developed this over 2 years with generous support from the Arcadia Fund and in close collaboration with the library community. So the model is designed to do a few things. It's designed to open access to all new MIT Press scholarly monographs and edited collections, which is roughly 80 to 90 books a year, from 2022 on via recurring participation fees that are paid by libraries. It provides participating libraries with term access to the backlist, which is around 2,300 titles that we have on our site. Those are otherwise remain gated. So we're just talking about opening the front list here. And then finally, it's designed really to cover partial direct costs of the publication of these really high quality works that are also available still for print purchase. And I'm happy to report that this model is now self-sustaining and that we have reached our financial goals each year, and we've been able to make our entire front list of monographs that are published each year open. So here's how it works. The press seeks partner libraries. Those libraries become a participating organization. They're asked to contribute based on a tier that takes into account the size and location of the library. If we reach our financial goals, the libraries are collectively opening access to these new titles, and as mentioned, they gain access to the full archive. These collection costs, because they're distributed or they're charged in a way that is both tiered and based on geography, we feel distributes those costs equitably. And the more participation we get results in lower member fees per institution. Before the launch of direct to open access books at the press were really funded primarily on a single title or small subject collection basis. While this allowed us to gradually open more of our books, it did not provide a long-term sustainable way to open our monographs immediately upon publication or at scale. In the program's first 3 years, D2O has funded 240 open access books, 159 in the humanities and social sciences, and 81 in science, technology, engineering, art, design, and mathematics. Our data show that open access books are embraced by readers around the world and are making meaningful contributions to debate both within and beyond the Academy. These books have been accessed close to 500,000 times, and we found that the OA advantage in terms of usage, comparing these OA books with similar books that are paid closed access, has really been profound. And with that, I'm going to stop there. Thank you all very much. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Nick. Lots of ideas in there. We'll finally move on to John, who will also talk on this theme of moving away from APCs and update us about what's been happening at PLOS. John, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Very good to be with you today. Just getting myself sorted here. So I'm going to use my 10 minutes to talk to you about the non-APC business models that PLOS currently operates. So to kick off, I'll briefly introduce PLOS. We're a native OA publisher and a non-profit mission-oriented organization. Our mission is centered on enabling and achieving open science and also in positively impacting a transition towards a more equitable research ecosystem. Our institutional business models are a really key mechanism for us delivering upon that ambition. We've got a portfolio of 14 journals in medicine and the sciences, and we publish in the region of 20,000 articles per year. Now, historically, the PLOS business model was entirely based on APCs, but for a number of years now, we've made it really clear that our intention is to move away from that. And there are a number of reasons why, but ultimately we think there are serious problems with solely utilizing article processing charges to sustain open access. APCs are exclusionary by nature, and they reinforce the structural inequities that exist within the research ecosystem. So what are the alternatives that we're exploring? Well, we've got a number of ways that institutions can partner with PLOS to remove the need for authors to pay processing charges on an article-by-article basis. And I want to talk to you about two of those models today. So for each model, I'm going to look at 5 areas: the challenge the model aims to solve, which journal or journals it covers, the basis for fees, how we use publishing data in our pricing, and some of the key attributes. So to start with community action publishing, what's the challenge that this model seeks to address? Well, CAP is designed to challenge the assumption that high exclusionary APCs are necessary for selective OA journals. The model operates across our most selective titles, PLOS Biology, PLOS Medicine, and PLOS Sustainability and Transformation. What's important to say here is that we're not aiming to dispel the notion that there are costs associated with highly selective journals. We're not. Instead, what we're trying to do is propose an alternative way to manage that cost via a collective action approach. All fees to participate in CAP are built around recovering the cost to PLOS of publishing the journal, plus a capped margin of 10%. We publicize these cost recovery targets. They're fully transparent. And these targets have nothing to do with APCs. They're the full cost to PLOS for each journal. To recover these costs, institutions are placed into a tier according to their publishing activity, and each tier carries a fee. All the fees are scaled to recoup those cost recovery targets I mentioned. Now, we don't discount on this model, and we all know how prevalent discounting has been in the subscription world, which is inevitably carried over to the transformative agreement space too. But isn't there a bit of an issue with the notion that the price a library pays for a service is dependent somehow upon their ability to effectively negotiate? That's pretty problematic, I think, in the context of equity. And our no discount policy is important because of the collective nature of the cost recovery behind this model, but it also ensures a level playing field in relation to the price paid. I mentioned publication history as one element to the fee structure. And when we look at publication history, we look at corresponding and contributing author affiliations. We do this across both of our non-APC business models, and it's a really important mechanism. Doing this brings in a completely new group as a potential stakeholder in the model, many of whom might never have a corresponding author affiliation on an article in a highly selective journal. But in spite of this, these institutions do have a stake in the journal's existence and their open access status. Practically, counting contributing affiliations allows us to spread cost among a much wider group. Lastly, and this is a bit of a subtle point, but this method also explicitly affirms the value of the contributing author role in the publication of research. One additional element of the model is the potential for distributing excess fees back to participating institutions. Here's a screen grab of our website where we list the cost recovery targets for the journals. And our pledge is that we will return any money we collect in excess of the cost recovery target. We will deliver that in the form of credits to subsequent year fees for participating institutions. As of 2023, we haven't hit any of the cost recovery targets just yet. And as we speak, we are right now working on a big review of this business model. This is to mark the end of the first phase of its existence. We'll be sharing the findings of this review in Q4 of this year, so please do watch out for more information around then. Global equity is the second model I want to touch on, and this uses a number of similar elements to CAP, but on top, it explicitly accounts for the ability to pay in relation to national economic context. This model is still extremely new and covers 4 journals that are also very new to our portfolio. These are community journals with really broad bases of submission and readership. And it made sense to us that these journals would be sustained by an institutional business model that aims to enable access to publishing across that very same broad base. So there are 2 elements to the pricing: anticipated publishing volume, and then the World Bank lending class of the country the organization is based within. Just as with CAP, we flatten costs among the widest pool of authors possible So we look at contributing and corresponding authors when assessing publishing volume. Again, just as we do with CAP, all of our pricing is public and fully transparent for global equity. So what next for these models? As I said, please do watch this space for more information on the CAP review. We think there's going to be some really interesting findings that come out of that, and we're really excited to share them with the community. We're committed to both of these models, to operating them, to continuing to learn from the data and the community feedback we get on them. We launched a new journal in November last year, PLOS Mental Health, and we decided this should sit on global equity. So we're really committing to the longevity of these models to support our portfolio. We do need to keep generating opt-ins across a really broad range of institutions. These models give us a framework to have a really diverse range of institutional participation. But to date, the institutions that do participate don't fully reflect this potential. And they mostly mirror the institutions that have historically paid PLOS APCs for many years. Expanding beyond this base customer group and building important new partnerships is a significant challenge for a publisher of our size, but nonetheless, one we need to focus on achieving. We recently expanded our sales team, for example, so we do now have increased capacity to pursue this goal. Lastly, at PLOS, our ambition is to occupy the role of a catalyst. That means we seek to affect change in the wider ecosystem. So with this in mind, our long-term ambition with these models is that we would love to demonstrate to other publishers that they can work in an alternative context. And that's one of the yardsticks we'll be using to measure our success long-term. Finally, I'd like to close with a short thought about how we assess value in the context of new alternative business models. Achieving greater equity in this space requires new approaches and navigating new complexities. It requires that we break the mold. But APCs and counts of final published articles with corresponding author affiliations are seriously entrenched as the principal method used to assess investment in open access. And we find that many institutions assess potential or indeed actual participation in our non-APC business models by using APC-based metrics. There's a degree of irony to that, but there's a clear disconnect. If we want alternative approaches like those I've walked through today to gain traction and survive the scrutiny that they will and should receive in relation to decisions about budgets, we have to justify the investment in them. How we do that is in the interests of all the stakeholders, publishers, institutions, consortia, funders, and of course the authors that these models are ultimately designed to deliver equity to. There are multi-stakeholder working groups designed to facilitate some of this discussion, including that which PLOS is running with JISC and Coalition S. But there is much discussion to be had. And one thing I think is clear, we must move forward and evolve away from the pre-existing markers of value that have brought us to where we are today. That's it from me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to everyone who has been with us through these presentations and posed questions in the Q&A area. I will just take a moment at this point, after now that our four speakers have had the floor, just to mention to you, and Lachlan, if you can bring up that one slide that I was going to throw up at this point, just to mention that just like the Wayfinders so far throughout the series, and including today that we've heard from, just like these various organizations have been on a journey and sharing experiences with building equity and open access, in a similar way, OASPA is on a journey as well. And we've released at the end of May some suggestions, some recommended practices that we think might help mostly publishing organizations, but also all stakeholders to increase equity in OA. And the link is coming up in chat just now. I just wanted to take a moment to say that that is out for consultation. It touches on a lot of the concepts that we heard of today, whether that's reducing issues for the waiver request process, or whether that's indeed wholesale shift to different types of thinking across collective action and no fee models. It's a very broad piece of work. We're looking for community feedback, and the consultation is open until the 1st of July. So please do pick up those links that are shared in chat and let us know your thoughts by next week. That would be brilliant. But I will turn back now to our discussion at hand, and some Q&A. Now, there have been some questions in chat. I wanted to lead off actually in a similar fashion and go back to in a similar fashion to the speaker order, in a sense, and go back, Matt, to where you started us off from, in that very rooted in perhaps shall we call it traditional way of thinking of gold, open access, and APCs, and the stuff that John was just talking about, evolving away from. But in your context that you were speaking to, Matt, there are some questions around what happens in the context of high-income countries, because of course you focused on the Research for Life lists, and also, are you, as part of the committee that you formed with Research for Life, are you thinking about solutions beyond waivers? And what's your response to maybe some of the other things you've heard and the other solutions, or indeed other thinking entirely? Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I realized I didn't mean to unintentionally become the defender of APCs or author-based fees. This is sort of like we're in a certain environment, and we are very much transitioning over and thinking about what's most sustainable and inclusive long term. So we're even looking at, could we do subscribe to open for some of our journals? Can we experiment with other models? But to answer specifically the question, we explicitly allow high-income countries or people in the United States, UK, for example, to get waivers. Somebody asked a percentage, and that's going to be around 4 to 5%. It's going to vary from journal to journal. And what I was showing at the end is, so from India being one of the places where we get the highest percentage of people asking, they also have a very high percentage of papers published from there. So 60% of papers published from there have requested a waiver, where that's the corresponding author. And the others, I'm assuming they have a collaborator who paid, very likely, right? So we really do give our waivers out, but we still see the problem. I think the biggest problem is that people might just be going elsewhere without even attempting to publish with us, right? They're not even submitting their papers because they see the idea of a fee. So we don't think that this is the final iteration of what we want to do. And we'd like to get to more regional changes in pricing or other ways of supporting our funding.
Great, thank you for that, Matt. And it's all part of being on that journey, right? So in that context, another question that has come in is around, can you share what it actually looks like, right? When an author is in the process, how does it look in terms of them seeking that waiver or the auto waiver in the background being applied? Can you share with us what the mechanics of that actually are? Oh, Matt, sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had opened it up, and now I'm searching for the tab. I could even share screen, but it's really simple. When you're in the submission system, there's you have to fill out all your information, and there's various things about authorship. But there's a place where there's a tab where it's financial, and you have to select one of 3 options. I'm agreeing that we will be responsible for paying these fees. 2, we expect someone else to pay, and there's a whole list of like how people would signify to us that their institution is going to assume paying. And the 3rd is we need to request a waiver. And when you click on that, it sort of explains Research for Life and sort of the automatic waivers, and there's a window for people to state whether they would need a waiver or a discount. Is really simple. And we want it to, we've tried to take away any of the language that says like, that makes it sound like you're asking for something. It's like, no, what are the things you need? We don't want people to feel like they're begging. But that's I think we're constantly trying to iterate on the language there.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing that, Matt. Now, a question for everybody on the panel is one moving on to that waivers point that Matt was making around how you perceive that process of waivers and the opportunity. Do you see opportunities in either reducing that burden and have you, are there learnings that you can share similar to what Matt has shared today around that specifically, and then whether there is any relationship between your experiences with waivers and other models that you've perhaps spoken to today? And I'll invite comments from anyone on the panel on this.
I'll just say really briefly. So we do have what I think is a fairly generous waiver program here at MIT Press for open access titles. The problem we've got is getting people to actually use it. We typically don't, we allow for up to 5%, in some cases up to 10% of articles in a journal to be OA or to be waivered, sorry. And but boy, it's difficult to get the papers for that could actually take advantage of this. We started a new journal last year called Imaging Neuroscience, which came out of the whole editorial board of the journal Neuroimage Design. They came to MIT Press. We started this new journal. It's been a big success, and we've got over 1,000 submissions last year, but we didn't have one opportunity to use a waiver, unfortunately, and that's concerning to us. And so we would definitely like to figure out ways in which we could encourage more papers to be submitted from those countries that qualify.
Thank you, Nick. Susan, obviously it looks very different where you are. You were talking about that whole different level of fees in the fee charging journals and the fact that it's cost recovery basis. How's the view from the AJOL perspective on this and on the application of waivers?
I am not aware off the top of my head of any of our journal partners charging APCs who actually have a waiver policy themselves, because as I said, it's pure cost recovery and every cent counts. But in terms of waivers that are offered by overseas publishers, who we are in essence competing with for papers, for the best research done by African researchers. Ideally that would be shared and published from within the African continent, research, strengthening the systems regionally, rather than a kind of a brain drain of articles to publishers elsewhere. And that we sort of see, I understand that the intention behind waivers is as being a really good one, and possibly an extremely fruitful one in terms of capturing perspectives from elsewhere in the world that might not be possible for journals publishing in those places. But we have a difficulty with it because it means that there is a draw, a re-emphasis that builds on the unfortunate kind of existing incentives of the sort of academic ladder climbing, career building, that are the metrics that have been in place for so long. Waivers kind of force that to an extent. So yeah, it's tricky for us, and we have no particular recommendation to publishers in the North who want to provide waivers. Our response, obviously, as I mentioned, is to try and encourage the journals that we're working with to move to fee-free completely in order to be on a level playing field, and such that researchers publishing from Africa can choose topics of interest to them rather than of publishing interest to prestigious Northern journals, and not have to pay a fee for publishing in a strong quality journal within their region or their country.
Thank you, Susan, for that perspective. And I think important to capture that that sort of tricky terrain where you end up perhaps sometimes in a situation where a researcher based I don't know, in Malawi or somewhere like that is either paying nothing to publish somewhere international where, you know, the regional context or perspective and readership might be lost, versus paying very, very, very little to stay regional. And that's the competition element that's, you know, a complex one. I have one, John, you haven't said your piece on waivers, so I'll allow you to come in on that. Sorry, go on.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. I think for me, I feel like waivers it's problematic when we think about waivers as being a bolt-on cost or a bolt-on, an extra that has to be covered somehow. And I think what many publishers would do well to do is to try and think about integrating the cost that they anticipate for waivers into the business models that they're formulating to support the journals. I think the author journey, as has already been touched upon, is really problematic when you go through this extra transactional step. So why should somebody who needs a waiver be asked to go through that when somebody who doesn't need a waiver doesn't need to navigate that? I think it's about leveling the playing field, which has just been said. There are lots of challenges with doing that. I think the other thing which I have experience of is the notion that you, as a publisher, try to gather an additional pot of funding to supplement your waiver policy somehow, and to potentially make it more sustainable, possibly, is really well-intentioned, but incredibly difficult to do in practice, because there are all sorts of challenging sort of procurement issues around the institutions essentially making a donation of that kind. So that's a very good idea, but it has issue in practicality as well. So I think the answer to me is trying to factor this in from the ground up. That's got to be the way forward.
Thank you, John. And very quickly, just so that I can tick this off, that's in the Q&A chat. Lastly, on waivers, Matt, do authors in Group B also get automatic full waivers? And this is Group B
for
of the...
For AJOL, yes.
Yes.
And
yes.
pretty much everyone who asks for a waiver is going to get one with us. That's how we work.
And is that automatic as well? The Group
automatic,
B,
it's like no question is the to A and B.
Great.
That in practice we've not denied any waivers.
Yeah, great. And from there comes this point of alignment, I guess, which is again a different question that we've had in chat around, as far as the committee that you're pulling together goes, Matt, are you also looking for other publishers to join? Are you looking to try and corral the practices? I know when OASPA has looked at waiver practice, there's lots of discrepancy around how these are applied. Yeah,
for sure. So it's a Research for Life committee. So it's not an AJOL only initiative. And the makeup of the committee is meant to have more than half of the people will be either researchers or librarians in Research for Life covered countries. But we do want publishers, and I do apologize for referring to the large international publishers that I'm most familiar with, but we want some of them on the committee, and they should be across various publishers. So we've got some, and we do need to sign up more. And we want like various perspectives, and the whole thing that's going to happen with the committee is, I put a link in the chat. It had sort of initial ideas for initiatives, but the committee is going to rehear from the members, and again, particularly those people in Research for Life countries, about what are the things that they think most need addressing in that first year, and we'll reshape the agenda. So it could be that they're seeing things about, no, we want to be able to publish in our own journals that are, considered the local journals, and we want those to be sustained and read globally. So maybe that is more of one of the things we do once we assess the needs.
Great, thank you, Matt. So moving then to this concept of, say, fee-free OA, right? So we've heard through the different presentations, we've heard about flipping from gold open access to diamond, let's call it, no fee open access. We've heard about flipping from subscription to no fee open access. And I guess combining a couple of things I've seen in the Q&A pieces, I wonder what the panel could say about tell us more about actually how are these sustained, how are these funded, and how are these scaled? So if we're keeping up with, let's assume the argument is that the global research produced is growing, will these kind of no-fee OA models be able also to scale with that? So more detail on the funding and sustainability, but also the scaling point. Panelists who would like to come in on that.
I'm going to jump in quickly, Malavika.
Sure.
I noticed in your framing of the question that you said, assuming that global research is growing. As regards one of the questions in the Q&A that relates to this, I'm not convinced that research from the global south is growing at the rate that other parts of the world have a perception that it is. I think the awareness of the volume of research that is coming out of the global south is increasing, because this hasn't been adequately captured by the commercial indexes in the past. Sorry, I've completely lost track now because I wanted to make that point. Can you remind me of the main question briefly?
What, just more detail on how no-fee OA can be funded and sustained.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's going to be this project that we're involved with in terms of the sustainability of diamond OA in Africa is going to be fascinating in that we are putting out calls for small grants for the sustainability and improvements of diamond open access journals publishing out of Africa. One of the things that is going to be interesting is to see how these journals are managing currently and how they conceive as improving in terms of their financial sustainability. So I mentioned during my presentation that surfacing the actual costs that are realized in terms of publishing a small standalone journal, instead of them being basically sorted by volunteerism and hidden in-kind contributions from institutions, those be surfaced and actually built into the incentives of the researchers formally, and that includes peer review and serving on editorial boards and so on and so forth, so that institutions can actually start contributing to those hidden costs for the sustainability of diamond OA. Country policy is obviously critically important in this as well. Latin American countries again are leading on this, and this is something that we're hoping to engage with eventually ourselves. I did want to mention about a comment about misconceptions about AJOL's inclusion criteria just very quickly. I'd be fascinated to hear from Anna what those are, because I know nothing about the misconceptions of that. And also just to mention, John Edwards, your talk was fantastic, but I noted particularly that you mentioned the expansion of your sales team, freeing you up to be able to do X, Y, and Z. AJOL has 6 full-time employees, supporting 700 plus journals in every way that you can think of. Yes, part of what we're doing is researching and trying to surface exactly what you're asking, Malavika, is the sustainability question about diamond and flipping to that. And by year 3 of the project that we're in at the moment, we hope to have put together a toolkit to assist on the basis of our learnings from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Nick, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just briefly. So I don't know that anybody knows how this gets solved at scale. I think that's an open question that is yet to be resolved, even though we would all like to see it solved at scale. I can say at a smaller scale, we've had some luck with the things that I talked about earlier today, but other things that we've done here at the press too. Oftentimes, and obviously this is not easily replicable, but it's good that they're doing it. We do have some pretty well-funded societies that are willing to actually underwrite the publication costs for their journal in order to be able to turn it OA. And that is a model that we're really happy to work with here at the press. It may mean that, you know, it's a sort of model whereby the press doesn't have, like, there's not some huge profit that we would gain from this, but it also takes a lot of the risk out of it too, because it tends to be sort of a fee-for-service model that can work really well for us. But of course, not every society is is funded to the point that they can actually do such a thing. Interestingly, we've recently had success with the journal that we started about 7-8 years ago called Open Mind, Discoveries in Cognitive Science. And when we started, it was APC based. But what we came to discover is that researchers in cognitive science and psychology really didn't have the money to be able to pay these APCs. And a lot of the bigger, more established journals were still subscription based, so there was no fee to publish in them. And this was a real competitive disadvantage for them. We ended up working out a deal that we've subsequently formalized between both Harvard and MIT libraries to fund the journal. So we've taken away the APC, and the end result is that the journal is more than doubled in size, and it's in the most recent year in terms of the number of articles it's published, and it's really publishing some top quality scholarship, and it's all really due to the investment that those libraries at Harvard and MIT are really willing to make. But of course, you can't extrapolate from just Harvard and MIT out to the world, but it is great to see these kinds of efforts taking place.
And while you have the floor, Nick, on D2O, what percentage of revenue for your book list is from participating libraries versus, I presume the question says book sales, and I presume this means hard copy book sales?
Good question, and I'm not willing to make up an answer because I don't know the actual answer. I will say that we are typically looking for we're looking for the D2O subsidy on a per book basis to be somewhere in the $15,000 to $16,000 range. That's what we're looking to get out of D2O on a per book basis. But I can't off the top of my head tell you what the percentages are between that and sales making up the full 100% of the revenue profile of that book.
Great, thank you. And John, just turning to you quickly, you mentioned about the flat fee model, but you didn't expand too much on it. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So the two models I mentioned cover 7 of the 14 plus journals. Flat fee caters for the remaining 7. I didn't mention it because it is ultimately an APC driven model. It's a bulk APC model. We operate +1 on that model. So making changes to it requires an awful lot of careful thought and planning. And we are engaging in that on an ongoing basis, but we haven't yet determined the best course in that particular context. One of the things we're thinking about long term is whether the 2 non-APC models I mentioned can take on other journals from the rest of our portfolio. That's a very active thought process at PLOS right now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your thoughts and your learning with us. It's been really valuable. We will be posting this video, and any other thoughts that panelists had on Q&A, we might share a document if panelists, you're happy to share some thoughts in written format as well that can live with the video. Thank you for thank you to everybody for joining, and for those interested in this Wayfinder series. Obviously, we've only had 3 so far, but the series continues, and we've now started to touch on other ways outside of the per publication context. So we have more in the Wayfinder series telling you more about collective action, different facets of what we might call diamond or no fee, and lots more still to come. Thank you, everybody, for your interest and your time. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Malavika. Thanks, everyone.